it tends to be the better investors who have the bigger vision.
Hello and welcome from the sidelines of the New York Stock Exchange here at the IPO Summit. I'm Jarrett Banks, Editor-at-Large of IPO Edge. Joining me today is Dr. Greg Verdine, the CEO of LifeMine Therapeutics. Dr. Verdine, welcome to the program.
Pleasure to be here, Jared.
All right, for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about LifeMine Therapeutics.
Well, LifeMine Therapeutics was founded to take advantage of this tremendous resource that's been hiding in plain sight in our planet. And this is the fungi, which are cousins of human beings, which are prodigious evolvers and manufacturers of drugs. We've known this resource was out there hiding in plain sight, but we didn't have a good way to actually recover, to retrieve these molecules from nature. So what LifeMine Therapeutics has done is to develop, use genomic sequencing of DNA on a vast scale, 100,000 of these organisms, and then to fill that with basic kinds of computational science and machine learning that allows us to interrogate those genes of the fungi and pull out new drugs that are meant to transform medicine.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the biopharma IPOs of the last couple of years. So far, it's been a lot of de-risk, late-stage, clinical stage assets. Is this a return to more conventional practices?
Well, what I've done as an entrepreneur, I've founded 6 public biotech companies and expect 2 more to go public within the next couple of years. And I've always sort of marched to the tune of my own drummer. And that is to say, if you come up with a company with a really powerful drug discovery platform that solves problems in medicine that have never been solvable before, that you'll be rewarded from that, and you'll be insulated from some of the trends that are gripping the broader market. So now, all that said, in the case of LifeMine, our very first drug is a new drug to treat organ transplant rejection. And it turns out this is an area where the existing drugs are miraculous. They're life-saving, but they also, they have like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of element to them. They're life-saving, that's Dr. Jekyll. The Mr. Hyde is that they cause kidney damage, they cause blood pressure elevation, they cause tremors, and they cause many, many different side effects. So what we did is went to our avatars, the fungi, and found a new drug, fundamentally new drug, that targets the same, not only the same pathway, but actually the same target, but does it in a new way that keeps it in the blood and out of the brain, out of the kidneys, out of the pancreas, out of the tissue. So it's an interesting, back to your question, this isn't really doing something, and it is truly something novel, but it's going after a well-understood target in a completely new way. So we're expecting that will have some of the risk reductions that you were talking about, but that risk reduction will show up in phase 1 as opposed to phase 2 or phase 3.
Right, right. As a biotech entrepreneur, how do you appeal to specialist investors, particularly in a high interest rate environment?
Well, all investors, at least in my experience, do actually want to change the world. And the investors who don't want to change the world don't invest with my companies.
Right.
And so in some sense, we have a captive audience of that subset of investors. And it spans the gamut from, I'm a venture partner with Andreessen Horowitz. We do a lot of seed stage investment and all the way through. And I've also done a lot of work with crossover investors. The one thing that unifies all of them is that they are really motivated to solve very big problems for patients. So they come to me, I go to them, they come to me to make that happen. Then what you need to do is to become effective at learning how to break down a complex thing to do something that people consider impossible. How do you break that down into a series of steps that represent the possible?
Right.
And if you can sketch that,
you got some excitement here
yeah,
on the trading floor.
Yeah. There, but for the grace of God, go on. So if you can sketch out that series of steps that reduce the impossible to the doable, and then go to the investors with that sketch, I found that invariably I can find investors, in fact, it tends to be the better investors who have the bigger vision. And those are the ones that I'm usually working with. And I have to say I'm very privileged to have done that, over now 12 biotech companies, 6 public, 1 sold privately to Celgene without having gone public.
How have you been able to attract and raise a great deal of private capital from high quality investors?
It's very much what number one, have a big idea.
Yeah.
And have a big idea that, the really important thing is, so that's not a one-off. You want a big idea that if you accomplish that once, the time that it will take and the risk that it will take to do the second one will become less time, less risky. The third one will become less time. So you have an acceleration of achievement and you have a net reduction of the overall risk. So those are platforms, drug discovery platforms. And the best drug discovery platforms in my world are things that actually are the thing that allows you to discover the actual drug.
Right.
In other words, the platform is the drug.
Right.
And it's not just a single drug, it's a series of drugs. So I've managed to do that successfully now 5 times, to where a big idea was reduced to practice, where that led to a new drug for something that had never been done before. This has happened at companies like Wave Life Sciences and now Parabolis Medicines and LifeMine as well. If you've shown the unique ability to actually make the big idea work and to do it in a reasonable amount of time, then you can get investors to sign up for that again.
Right.
The main thing as we look forward into the future, Jared, is we do really need to figure out how to make all this go faster. So if you're building a drug discovery platform, it's not good enough to have the first drug take 8 years to get to a clinical candidate. Like that has to be dialed back to more like 4 years or 5 years. And so I think one factor that's really going to make that possible is the impact of artificial intelligence and machine learning. It will accelerate the early stage of things, and we're already beginning to see some of that happening.
That's very exciting. What is the potential to upend traditional drug discovery paradigms with this science?
Every one of these companies that I'm talking about has upended the paradigm. In other words, it has gone after a disease. I'll give you an example. Just recently, Wave Life Sciences succeeded in the first example ever in a human patient of correcting a letter error in a human disease, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. So the RNA encoding that protein has a letter that's erroneous, that's caused by mutation. That's what causes the disease. Mm-hmm. So Wave Life Sciences came up with a new kind of drug that actually programs the cell to restore the natural, the correct letter, and that leads to a restoration of the correct protein, and that leads to reversal of disease. That's disruptive. Mm-hmm. The same company this year, 2024, reported the first example of in a genetic disease where the patient has a normal copy of the gene, and then a disease copy of the gene. And the company came up with a medicine that obliterates the disease copy of the gene at the RNA level, the RNA version of the gene, and it not only leaves alone the normal copy, but it actually boosts it by about 20%. So those are concrete examples of none of those had ever been done before in the history of science. In the case of Warp Drive, the company that I started, which is now called Revolution Medicine, that company came up with an entirely new drug discovery system that enabled us to drug the second most common driver of human disease and cancer. That's called GTP-RAS or RAS-on, and that was called undruggable. It had never been drugged before. And now there are 3 drugs in the clinic, 3 more in the clinic at Revolution Medicine. Parabolis Medicines, the company that I started from 0 to 1 also, that took the #1 driver of cancer in humans, something called beta-catenin, and had to invent an entirely new kind of drug called a helicon that allowed it to get at that disease driver. That's now about a year and a half into the clinic also. So 2 out of the 3 top drivers of cancer in humans were thought to be undruggable. They were, in fact, people called them undruggable, and they have been drugged by inventing either really new types of drugs that involve an entire system for drug discovery. So this is the definition of ditching the old regime and building a new regime from scratch.
It's tremendously exciting. Last question, what are you most excited about for the rest of 2025?
I'm very, very hopeful that in 2025, we will see a broader realization that, in particular biotech, that what biotech is doing is really enabling us to impact human health in ways that are, number one, fundamentally really, really inventive, and number two, impact the lives of these patients and their families. A lot of times people forget the families. So hope springs eternal. We're very much hoping that 2025 will lead to the broader recognition of that. We have to do a better job of educating the public that, especially biotech, many of us at the stage that we're at, we don't have profit streams. We can't rebalance our portfolios. We may only have a small number of drugs. So what we have is innovation. And I'm an optimistic person, but this really does require a societal recognition that what we're doing in these biotech companies is so precious and so important that it is valuable, it needs to be protected, and it needs to be fostered. I'm hoping that'll happen in 2025.
All right, we'll leave it there. This has been Dr. Greg Verdine, the CEO of LifeMine Therapeutics. I'm Jarrett Banks, signing off from the New York Stock Exchange.